I'm a firm believer in God sends you what you need. And I would have never thought this is what I needed to get ahead in my career because, career is one thing and sort of working on yourself is another thing. Like I separated those two things. And I think what I've found is this foundation is about my life, and that life then spans into my career, my family, my friends, my happiness. It's all the same. It all comes from that same place.
Hi, I'm Blake Schofield, founder and CEO of The Bridge to Fulfillment, mom to 3, USA Today Top 10 professional coach, and former corporate executive who got tired of sacrificing my life for a comfortable paycheck. My mission is to expand women's perspectives and empower them to achieve greater impact at home and work without sacrifice. This is The Bridge to Fulfillment. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Bridge to Fulfillment. I am super pumped to have my client, Melissa, here today to share a little bit of insight about her personal journey. And I could not be more thrilled to have you here, Melissa. Just watching and being a part of your journey has been such an honor. And I think that there's so much wisdom in your journey that you can really share to make a huge impact for other people. So thank you for being willing to share and be here today.
Absolutely. I am honored and blessed to be here. So thank you.
Yeah. All right, lady. So where do we start? I often like to start a little bit with just sharing a little bit about your background and what was going on in your life. What were you experiencing when we connected?
I kind of looked back at this, there's sort of when you're in it, you have an emotion. And then when you can look back at it, you have some of those same emotions, but you look at it in a different perspective. But knowing the knowledge I have now, I was just in a situation where I was completely out of alignment. We talk about that all the time. And I was worn out. I was frustrated. I was in a situation where my supervisors were not supporting my work style. It was becoming, the more I tried to speak up, it was just getting worse. And, I was just exhausted. We were changing as a company, which was exciting, but I just kept thinking, okay, if I can just get this done, it'll get better. And you just keep doing that striving and it never ends. And so I was just at a point, I was like, okay, I need a coach. I've got to get out. I've got to figure out something else to do. But I was afraid financially to make that change. I had so many fears. And so I came across the program and I reached out to you and, it helped me sort of make that first leap.
It's always amazing. And I hear this often from people who listen to the success stories and they're like, well, the women on here seem so confident. And it's just like, it's so easy. But, it's one of those things that, and I was actually just on a client call earlier this morning, we were talking about that the path to clarity in the journey that we take inside the Bridge to Fulfillment, it becomes so abundantly clear why you are unfulfilled. It becomes so obvious what you need and don't need in your life and what you can say yes and no to. And I think people often don't understand that. And so it feels like this very hazy, how in the world am I going to get clarity?
Yes.
But just even hearing you say that, it's like, well, now I see it for what it is. I see that I was misaligned. I see that the value system and the way I worked was not a match. And I see how I just kept trying to make it better. But if you could take yourself back to what that experience felt like before you understood it, what did you think? What were you saying to yourself? And what were you feeling? Because I think that's most likely somebody today that's going to be listening to this is feeling that, and they don't understand why, just in the same way you didn't.
Yeah. I mean, the emotions were, I felt like a failure. I felt like no matter what I was doing, wasn't working. My confidence was completely stripped away. I felt like, I was just lost. I mean, you're just lost. You're tired. You feel undervalued. You just feel like there's no escape. You feel like you're stuck in something. You can't figure out a way out. You feel like financially, if you make a move, What if you did the wrong thing? Fear can be a very toxic thing, and it just was fueling everything going around. But also, I mentioned hopeless. I just felt like everything I was doing was not working, and it was making me feel worse about myself. I think that was the harder part. There was nothing that I was doing trying to alleviate the problem that was working, and it was just making me feel worse about myself and situation.
Yeah. And I see this as a really common thing. I talk often about the breakdown cycle, right? Which is what happens when we stay on a path that we're not fulfilled in and it's not in alignment with us. And the longer we stay on there trying to suck it up, make it work, believe that, we should be grateful for what we have. Mm-hmm. The more and more our confidence gets stripped away, the more and more we feel trapped, the less and less the things we're doing are actually working. And I think it's so easy to believe that something's wrong with us or we're broken or we're failing.
Yes.
Instead of being able to see that it's just not a match. There's that old saying from Albert Einstein. This is a quote that helped me make it through in my most misaligned place in my life. It's by Albert Einstein. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. Mm. And I just feel so much emotion around that because I see so many people internalizing what's happening in their life and believing something's broken or wrong with them, when in fact, that's never the case. But if we don't understand who we are and what we're gifted at and how we work best and what we need to thrive, it's very easy to get into the wrong place or working in the wrong way and think something's broken or something's wrong with us.
Yeah. I was definitely feeling like I had to change everything about myself in order to fit into what was happening around me. And while there are, I would say normal, using the word normal is sort of tricky, but we all have to do things to kind of adjust. But when you lose yourself, yeah, it's a totally different thing. You're trying to fit into somebody else's world that you have no autonomy anymore.
So how did you go from feeling like you were failing, trying to make something work that wasn't working, feeling trapped, all of the things you just talked about? How did you move from that to being able to understand, wait a second, just that I'm misaligned, and wait a second, there are other opportunities for me? Can you think back, like maybe what was the first one or two big like aha moments or shifts for you?
I think the first was you get to a point where you're like, what do I have to lose? Like you have to kind of have that courage to say, okay, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm not going to be any better as if I'm just like at the lowest of my life. Like the things are equal. I had reached out to you about having this confronting conversation. I remember you saying to me, if you don't do this, you will, I don't know if it was you will regret it, but if you don't stand up for yourself now, you won't. And I thought, okay, I've just got to do this. And I remember having this conversation was so hard, and it was something that I had to bring to the attention. It was something that had been done to me in the workplace, and it was very demoralizing to me and had really just further reiterated things that I already knew, but I wanted to speak up for myself. And I remember preparing for it. And I remember literally turning on music and dancing before having the conversation with them, just to kind of get the energy up in my body. And then having the conversation. And when I got off the phone, I literally shouted that I had never stood up for myself in my whole life. Like I had stood up for myself in that moment. And it was the most amazing, amazing thing in this world. I've never felt anything like it. I think we all, as women and strong women, you have those bouts of confidence to get you through things, but this was something I had literally never felt. And it was so empowering. So it was a moment where I knew everything was probably going to get ripped away from me, but I had something that was so hopeful from that moment of that feeling.
Yeah, that was a really interesting place in the journey, and so beautiful to see all of these things that you had suffered and not shared and tolerated that you making the decision that you were worth more than that. And I'm going to say something that might be difficult for those listening, and it's always meant from a place of love, but you can't be taken advantage of unless to some degree you allow it. And I say that, and it's really hard when you feel like you're a victim of an abusive boss or a toxic workplace or a family relationship where you feel like you're, abused or undervalued in some way emotionally, etc. But it is through the recognizing of what you're no longer willing to tolerate that changes your life. Yeah. And something in that moment helped you say no more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because I had, continued to let it happen, and I was just afraid. I was afraid because I couldn't see the other side, and you can't see the other side when you're in it. That's the hardest part is that, and I can't speak to whether there was one thing related, but after I had that conversation, I was let go within a week or two after I had that conversation. It was hard, but it was a gift. It was a gift that I couldn't give myself. I couldn't let go of that situation. But if I had just been let go and not spoken up for myself, it would have been a story where I would probably still be under the covers in my bedroom, right now, just because I wouldn't have felt as empowered. So something, it didn't turn out how I wanted it to at that moment, but I started to gain myself in that moment. And I saw a light. It was a peak of a light, but it was there. And so I had that to go on.
I love that. And I think it's important to share when you get to a place that you were at in the situation, there was a lot of evidence that had been stacked that was showing that it was inevitable. It was inevitable that this was not going to work. It was inevitable that that moment was going to come. Either you were going to bail out or they were going to push. Yeah. And you stepped into making the decision for yourself rather than allowing something to happen to you that was, as I said, fairly inevitable. We had enough evidence to say this is what's happening.
Yes.
And that was powerful because in your whole life, you hadn't done that. You had allowed things to happen to you. You had sat back. You had
absolutely
bent yourself in a puzzle and a pretzel almost to be able to try and make other people happy. And it was a moment of saying, enough, I choose me.
Yeah, because I had just been taught. I had two parents that were like, you work hard, you do whatever they tell you to do. You show up every day, you don't miss work, and you just essentially suck it up for the rest of your life, no matter what, because you can't lose your job. I mean, granted, they came from a very different situation, but it was amazing how powerful that was for me. Like, I thought I had to take it because there were no other options. But, my parents had given me the gift of going to college and being able to make those decisions because was able to get an education and develop a career. But yet I felt like the person who had nothing. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What did you learn through the beginning part of your journey about your emotions, about some of your belief systems that fundamentally shifted your stress levels, how you thought about how you went about your life?
I think some of the biggest things for me was stopping the internal voices of there's something wrong with you, you're too sensitive. You and I had talked at one point about, I think we labeled it almost like a feminine working style, like a very collaborative working style. And I had began to think that there was something wrong with my innate abilities. And seeing that was just so eye-opening. It's like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just not in the right place. I mean, it seems so simple to talk about now, but you have beaten yourself up so much because you're trying to fit in that you lose every sense of anything. Like, I wouldn't have thought I could even do my job that I've been doing, for the past 20 years. You literally believe everything that you're feeling around you. And when you start to take that first step, you start to see, It's not me. What I am okay. I am enough. And there's nothing I have to change about myself. I just have to change the situation I'm in. There's nothing wrong with me.
That's so powerful on so many fronts. We were talking before we started the podcast about how different our lives would have been if we knew this in our, God, I would say 20s. If I had known this in my 20s,
wow,
different my life would have been. Knowing what you know now about yourself, how you thrive, what your secret sauce skills are, and how to stand in and understand how to stand in your value, how to use your emotions to work for you as opposed to your emotions driving your life.
Mm-hmm.
How would that have changed the trajectory of your life if you had known this, let's say, coming out of college?
Oh, wow. I think that, coming out of college, I had a confidence. Like you're so like, okay, I have this degree. I'm ready to go. I was so fortunate at the beginning of my career. I landed a job in Big Four public accounting, which, very little of the population does. And given the background and the grades and things I have, they weren't what a lot of people were doing. But I managed to nail an interview, be confident, and get that job. But what happened was, things that happen in the work, you hit intertoxic work environments, you're working long hours and under all the stress, and it slowly starts chipping away at all of those things that you are. You let it kind of, or I did in my case, I let it take my confidence little by little. A male figure or any boss saying something to me, I let it chip and I believed what they were saying. It wasn't constructive criticism. Much of it was not. Much of it was, trying to change me or trying to say that there was something wrong with me, but in a different way. It wasn't so obvious. And if I had not been more self-confident and rooted in that self-confidence and been around people that were saying, don't let that get to you. Just, you know who you are, be who you are. There's nothing wrong with who you are. It could have been something that simple. It would have been so different. So having something like this that would have encouraged me and empowered me, wow, I can't imagine what I would be doing right now.
Thank you for sharing that. I've been thinking about this question a lot because a couple months ago, I went to speak to a group of moms for National Charity League. And those who don't know what that is, it's a mother-daughter group that is focused on doing charity. Mm-hmm. And went to talk to the moms, and some of them asked, like, what would you say to my daughter how to start her career? And then one of the women asked about burnout in children in the workforce. And I thought, oh my goodness. And so I just shared my perspective, which is if I had had this knowledge and understanding that I teach, I wouldn't have gotten shingles at 28. I would have been a far more present mother. I wouldn't have constantly been going through the cycle of hoping the next job or promotion would make me happy.
Yes.
I would have changed careers at 30 when I knew what I was doing wasn't aligned. I would have gotten back years of my life, and I didn't. And I know that was the exact path I needed to go on to save other people from the mistakes that I made. But often I think people look at the bridge to fulfillment and they have one perspective about what it is. Mm-hmm. And then they come through and they have a different one. And I think it's because what we do is very different than what anyone else does. And so I'd ask your perspective, Melissa. You came into this journey thinking one thing. What is your perspective about this journey and what you've learned now having gone through it?
It sounds so cliche to say it's so much more. It's so much more, but it truly is. I went into it thinking, okay, Blake, she's going to give me the 5 things that are going to make me successful. And we're going to find my perfect career by answering 10 questions. And you just think once I check all the boxes and once I do all the exercises, I'm going to graduate and then I'm going to land that job and I'm going to be happily ever after. And what I learned was it wasn't about checking those boxes. It wasn't just about checking those boxes. The exercises were only the surface of you digging and finding and discovering yourself again. You discover yourself, you discover what makes you tick, you discover how you think, you discover your innate abilities. And it's so empowering, and it just keeps building and building. And then there's a community of other women that you're talking to that are going through the same things and have been through the same things. And it's just something, it's way beyond what I thought it would be. And it's not what I thought I needed, but it was what I needed. It was just amazing. It's like, I'm a firm believer in God sends you what you need. And I would have never thought this is what I needed to get ahead in my career, because, career is one thing and sort of working on yourself is another thing. Like, I separated those two things. And I think what I've found is this foundation is about my life, and that life then spans into my career, my family, my friends, my happiness. It's all the same. It all comes from that same place. And this has helped me really get that firm foundation.
I always say how you do one thing is how you do everything. Everything is interconnected. And I also think when we have struggles or challenges in our life, it can often be easier to see it in our careers. It feels safer to see it in the career and say, I'm going through cycles of burnout, or I have this toxic boss, or I got this new leader and we're not getting along, or I dread going to work, or I'm not feeling a passion or an energy like I normally do. We can see it there first because it feels as a society safer.
Yeah.
To talk about that. Knowing that and knowing what you've experienced, can you share a little bit about your perspective about how you saw it in your career, but what you learned about how everything was connected? How has this shifted or changed your personal life, your relationships, your level of happiness, et cetera?
I think it's, for mine, the huge part of mine was this confidence piece. And then I think I've spoke to, it's sort of something that kind of comes and goes. Or for me, my journey has been something that comes and goes. And it was something that growing up, my mother just was not very confident. And as much as she, I think, tried to overcompensate for that and instill that in me, it just wasn't an innate thing. And it's like, I think she thought she was doing it, but it wasn't happening. And so not having that foundation was something that was always off for me. And I think it was where it would allow me to excel in certain areas, but then I would keep falling back. I had this sort of back and forth all the time. And having sort of understanding that confidence and understanding how to use that, it's given me the confidence just to, even if it's a small little thing every day, even if I'm going through a period of 4 or 5 days where I'm not feeling that great, or I'm having trouble getting started on something, I know that if I just do one little thing, and then I just give myself permission to say, you know what, you're just going to do that one little thing. And it gives me the confidence and the motivation to keep going. It may take a little longer. And I'm like, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be what everybody else's journey is. This is yours. But it's that one thing, and it has just fed into so many other things. And it's made me so much more confident about that, which I know is going to lead to a much more confident professional future as well.
You mentioned earlier that you separated career and personal development. I think most people do.
Yeah.
Also, before you came, you had done a lot of work for yourself personally through a lot of maybe more traditional methods that people would think of, right? Counseling, therapy, et cetera. Mm-hmm. I'd love your perspective on how you would describe that versus this journey and experience.
It's interesting because I had been doing a lot of work with a therapist for, sort of off and on over the years, but the past probably 5 years or more, I had really been digging into some things and uncovering some things and sort of getting to some of those root beliefs and causes. And it helped me get to a space where I could handle information and I could process information. And I think it helped me when this came along to be able to take the information and use it in a different way and do it logically. And that may not make sense, but the two are quite different, but they work together. I'm probably doing a terrible job of explaining this, but it's just like they go hand in hand. And one is sort of like my therapy, I see as my sort of stable outsider to keep me grounded. And this is helping me have that grounding. But then the bridge has helped me sort of connect that grounding and expand and go further. So it's almost like this is keeping me footed and I can feel my feet, but this is helping me reach just a little bit farther and see it in a little bit of a different way. And you having two perspectives has been amazing too. Most of the time they're very much aligned and sometimes they're very different. Not that they're contradicting each other, but they're just giving you a different way to look at things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So through this journey in the bridge, you were exposed to, I like to describe them, especially somebody who got a degree in psychology. Dad has a PhD, sister has a master's. I watched my mom do probably a decade worth of therapy herself. The methodologies that we use in the Bridge to Fulfillment are, in my opinion, much more cutting edge in terms of speed and ability to create transformation very rapidly. Because I think most people believe when you do some of the interpersonal work, it has to take a long time. It's painful. You have to talk about all of this stuff. I'm interested in your perspective, knowing that you've now explored and experienced this. How would you describe some of the work that we do in the Bridge to Fulfillment to help expand and transform your perspectives, your beliefs, your life in a way that's different?
I was just thinking about an instance where, in therapy, you're thinking about things and, things that are happening. And a lot of mine are rooted in belief systems and childhood things in, the way I was raised or how my parents thought about things. And it sort of helps you get a perspective of, okay, this is where that kind of comes from. But I recall a session that we were doing with Britt, and she was going through something where it was making you think about it a different way, to not get sort of stuck in it, stuck in the root of it. And it was like, okay, think about something that has happened to you that you believe. And if it's somebody else, so in this case, it was something that my mom believed. And it was like, okay, so she's on this side of the room and she has her belief. That's great. What do you believe? You're on this side of the room. What's your belief about what that situation was? As simple as that was, it was like, okay, I don't have to be stuck in this. I can be over here exploring what I think. And I don't have to be stuck in what was there all the time. But it just sort of helps you sort of go through those things and go, okay, that doesn't have to be part of my story. This isn't part of my story. It's something totally different.
Yeah, because therapy, right, takes you back to what happened. And I think what we really focus on is, how do you create what you want?
Yes. And that's exactly, it was more about my thoughts, my decisions, what I saw for myself. And I think it was doing it with, sort of a thankful thing to say, okay, I understand that this is what was going on at the time, but this is my life now, and this is what I'm doing, and this is where I'm going.
And how has that enabled from a speed and an ability to transform your beliefs or transform your day-to-day? How has that been versus things you've done in the past?
It's different because I think you let go of them versus dwelling on them. Because I think, and I still found myself kind of going back and forth sometimes, and that's okay. But you realize, okay, it's okay, think about this, but then, keep moving. I think that I honor things and then let go of them and let them go versus having to go, oh, this happened to me. And, I wish I hadn't have received this message when I was 5 years old. And because of this, I'll just never do anything else. You can kind of get stuck in that and it almost becomes a crutch. I think it's important to understand it, to uncover it, because I think that's part of the journey. But being able to just let go and say, okay, but what am I going to do? What do I want to do now? And just sort of let that go. I think one time I remember visually, I don't know if it was talking to you or something, and it was just like, about letting it be a balloon and just have the thought, honor the thought, let it go. Just, let it go.
Yeah, there's so much freedom in that, because the amount of time that we can get stuck in the stories, right? It can literally just eat your life, and it destroys an ability for you to see reality for what it is. And that's really, if I have to look at your journey and say, where do I see the most transformation? I see that when you came in, you were living in the stories. When things were difficult or triggered you, it was just a mental spiral. And you couldn't get above and see the entirety of what was happening, because it all became this emotional thing of, it's my fault,
Yes.
Whatever that story was. And that was driving all of your experiences, fear and the stories. And today I look at the amazing transformation that you've had, where you go, oh, yeah, those things have happened, but that's not me. That's not who I am. That's not how I make choices. And then when circumstances come that are unexpected, you have a much clearer lens to look from and say, how do I feel about this, and what's happening, and in what way do I want to use or choose to ignore if it doesn't feel right, whatever's coming my way. And that's what I've seen for you. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. And things coming your way. That's another thing where the confidence piece has played in. Is it was sort of like things coming, even in the past month or two, things are coming at you. And it's like, okay, I've got to ask somebody what to do. I was like never looking at myself, because I'd almost begun not to trust myself, because I thought, I can't make a decision because I'm a mess. But being able to go, no, you have the answer. It's okay to seek advice. Ask a friend, talk to them about it, but trust your gut. You have it. You're smart. The things you've done. Hello, you can do it. Make your decision. Make your choices. Make your own choices.
And there's such peace and power in that.
It's amazing. Because I have, I've told you, I think yesterday somebody presented a position to me, and it was just sort of to keep money coming in the door. And it was something I would have done the first year I worked versus, working 20 years. And it's like, you don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but you're like, what is this going to add to me? It's going to add something financially, but I think it's going to deduct so many other things and keep me from things that it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And it's like, I would have, been like, oh, well, I can just do this. It's like you talk yourself into it. And it's like, nope, don't talk myself into things anymore. And I don't try to fit into anything anymore.
And with that, you have more space for the things that do.
Yes. And that was what was so hard for me, because I know I battled with you. I was like, well, Blake, I have to keep money coming in the door. I have to take a job. I have to do something. And yeah, like right now, I'm not working. I'm sort of in between things, and I'm just relishing in it. And I'm like, but how can I use this time to keep going and learning and making myself better?
That's awesome. Well, lady, it's been so much fun. I know our time is almost up. So thank you for your graciousness today.
Thank you.
So with that said, let me ask, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should ask? Or anything that's just really on your heart that you want to share to help others?
I think that my biggest thing is that, if you think something's wrong, speak up for yourself. If you aren't happy, fight for yourself. And the biggest thing is invest in yourself. Invest in what you need. Because if you keep doing the things that you're doing, it's going to end up costing you financially, probably more. It's going to end up definitely costing you physically and mentally. And just invest in yourself, and you're worth it. I mean, we're all worth it. Be kind to yourself, believe in yourself.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And for those of you guys that were listening, I hope Melissa's story has given you a doorway to possibility and shown you, right, that life can, well, maybe what's the best way I want to say it is that you can create the life that you want. Even if today it feels dark, even if today you feel stuck, even if today you don't know or understand your value, even if today you have a difficult time standing up or asking for what you want. There's power in learning and understanding the skills to get over your fears, know the right steps to take, really understand who you are and your inherent value and where you thrive. And when you understand those things, it creates massive ripple effect change for every single area of your life. So with that said, thanks again for joining. And until next time, have a great week.